Hello and welcome to the Startups of London podcast. I'm your host Ozan and the founder of Startups of London. Today I'm joined by Eloise Skinner, founder at One Typical Day. One Typical Day is defined as a video insights platform to help students figure out their career steps. And I think it's an interesting business, but I think Eloise's background is even more interesting with a variety of businesses, a career that has started in law and that's now in entrepreneurship. So I think today is going to be a really interesting conversation where we talk about entrepreneurship, building businesses, perhaps going into other topics such as creativity, learning, growth, mindset, and so on. Welcome to our chat, Eloise.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's start with One Typical Day. Can you let us understand what type of a business it is, how it works in the background, and what do people see when they look at the business from a brand perspective? What is the emotion that you are trying to create? What is the value that you are trying to create? Just give us the whole picture.
Yeah, so One Typical Day, still early stage. It was a business that was developed on an incubator sort of over the last 7 to 8 months. And the idea behind it is really to demystify the world of work for students. So to give people a real insight of what it's actually like to work a day in the life of lots of different professions and lots of different careers. So when I first had the idea, what I wanted to do was essentially go behind the scenes of a daily working life. For example, day in the life of a junior lawyer, junior banker, junior doctor, whatever, and almost give like a vlog style insight into what those days were actually like for those professionals, and then show that to students so they wouldn't feel like they didn't know what they were getting into when they went into a first career. And it was almost born of my personal experience, which was that I studied law and then trained to be a lawyer, but really without any proper insight into what the actual working life of a corporate lawyer was like on a day-to-day basis. And really the only way that I was able to get that was through internships. Internships are now harder and harder to get. Obviously, with the pandemic, a lot of things went online anyway. And so one of our goals with the business is social mobility, to enable students who maybe couldn't get an internship for whatever reason, or financially it was very difficult to travel to an internship, to enable them to see what it's actually like to work those careers, and really to broaden horizons for people who maybe wouldn't have considered a particular career before. And the other initiative, or the other element behind it, is sustainability. So the graduate recruitment market at the moment for students coming out of university is quite environmentally unfriendly. So there's a lot of travel involved, there's a lot of merchandise production involved. And one of the intentions with a digital platform that really enables you to see within these careers is like, can you do all of this without traveling across the country to a careers fair? Can you speak to students in the way that they expect to be spoken to now, based on, their content consumption and digital trends and things? So yeah, the idea is to give an insight into the working world through video format.
And where is the business today? If we were to speak in terms of some of the metrics that you follow as a founder of the business.
Yeah, so we are pre-launch officially. We have a prototype that we've been running through with user testing. And at the moment, we're in a research partnership with the London College of Communications and the University of the Arts London to explore the use of immersive or creative technologies in what we're doing. So we're at this kind of prototyping stage where we're thinking about bringing some elements of virtual reality into our video content. So we'll probably finish up that research partnership with them first before we start to before we develop a final product to launch. But at the moment, yeah, pre-launch with a prototype, doing some research about virtual technologies and sort of the more immersive side of video content, which I think is really exciting actually. And we have been on the Oxford University incubator, which is where I did my business school training. So we're still going through that process of kind of incubation, prototyping, and things like that.
I was a part of an accelerator as partly as Startups of London last year, and in our group there were these fantastically bright group of people who were working on a dating app that would work essentially like TikTok, so more video driven, to give more personality. And that seems to be a new niche in terms of how people consume content. a different version of the Twitters and Facebooks and Instagrams endless scroll button video is how people are engaging with content. It seems nowadays it's very addictive. That's something that we all, I think, need to be careful of. And I know you have a background in psychology as well to a certain extent. That's for our audience there. That's from our mini chat with Eloise before the podcast. And they in a way hack the neural pathways, so we have to be cognizant of that. But at the same time, if you look from a business perspective, it's just the way people love to consume content. So in considering that direction as well, what type of a video delivery and consumption experience are you planning to create? Is there any insight into that you can share?
Yeah, I think that's so interesting actually. I love that idea of the dating app that's more video based, because I think that is, for me at least as a consumer, I think that's the most interesting and, like you said, compelling, maybe addictive, maybe form of content. And I think especially in education, where a lot of the careers resources have traditionally been written, or they've been really long form, or it's been like an in-person lecture that you have to go to as a student. I think now students being on their phones so much, the next generation of people who will be coming into the workplace, or the next generation of leaders essentially in these professions, will be people who have grown up on apps like TikTok and other visual apps like Instagram and things. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that we wanted to draw on, and my intention really was to have this short video form content. The other thing that I think is really interesting when it comes to careers content is authenticity. So really seeing behind the facade of corporate professional,
Yeah.
the viewpoint, that the firms want you to have this really glossy idea of what it feels like, or what the experience is like to work as a corporate lawyer or banker or whatever it is. And I think almost giving people a realistic insight of those professions. And I think that might be quite a difficult thing for people to accept on the sort of more established side of the profession. So people who have been doing careers content for years and years, for example, I think have a bit of a view that it needs to be really polished, and it needs to be, show the best side of all the company's culture and everything, which I think there definitely is a place for that content. But also I think the generation coming up now really expect a raw form of real life, so that they can actually experience what it's like before they get there. And so I think it's a blend of those two things. It's high quality, but it's also authentic.
This makes me think. Have you seen this? It turned into kind of a meme about a month ago, I think, how Gen Z signs emails. So what do they say at the end
Yeah.
of the? Have you seen that? So
Yeah, I love it.
it's kind of in line with what you just said, isn't it? It's about transparency. What type of a lens you're actually taking to that company culture. And the most difficult thing is making it credible, making it genuine, because it can be a PR piece, and nobody will pay or spend any time to be advertised to with their own intent. People like that is very very rare that we stick with an advertisement knowing it is advertising us something. It has to have so much of production value, story value, or get something perfect. Otherwise, like 99%, people will not pay attention to ads, not intentionally at least.
Mm.
So it needs to not be an ad. Is my point when companies tell about their company cultures, show what kind of a day, what kind of a typical day would look like. It needs not to be an ad. Is my perspective, and I think that's the biggest challenge of this type of a business. So I know it's quite early still, but how would you go about if you were to just spitball and have kind of a mini brainstorm about this right now? How would you go about making sure the content people will consume are not like ads, but like genuine content about that business?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and I definitely agree. People don't want to be sold an ad of this ideal or perfect kind of working life if it's not actually matching up to the reality of what they're going to get in the workplace. I think one thing that I'm really interested or keen on is having it almost peer-to-peer led. So young professionals or junior professionals, let's say, people who have just entered the workplace, of giving their perspective and their viewpoint on what it's actually like at that place to work. And I think that works quite well because there's an element of trust there between junior professionals to students who are about to take those roles. And there's also an element of closeness in terms of what you're actually likely to experience. And I think,
Relatability, yeah.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, sort of a more of a connection and yeah, relatable experiences. And I think when I went into my first job, a lot of what we were being told about the way the career worked was from really senior people, which I think obviously, yeah, you do need to know how the career works right at the top or at the more senior levels. But it's also the most valuable insights that I had along the process were from trainees who were just a couple of years above me saying, this is what you'll actually be doing on a day-to-day level. So I think that kind of, that kind of relatability. It's interesting if you watch ads on platforms like TikTok now, they really try and emulate or follow the style and the nature of the platform as if those ad creators were content creators themselves. And I think those are the ads that maybe do have the most effect, is where you're actually matching it to the expectations of the content itself, not just randomly trying to superimpose like your own idea of how to advertise a product. So yeah, really understanding like content trends, what people want to watch, the kind of attention span, I guess, of people who are watching content that is maybe trying to sell you an idea, even if it's not trying to sell you something directly. Because I think when you're with careers, you're not really trying to sell a job, you're more trying to like explain or enlighten someone about what it's actually like. But there still is an element of, like maybe this is what you want style. So yeah, making it relatable, making it peer-to-peer, making it more of an insight focused piece of content rather than an ad.
It's a media business to a certain extent, I would say, and because it's a startup, it will start as small. I'm sure you'll have people around you that you trust, but to a certain extent, it comes down to what type of a curation process that you're going to push things through. That's going to determine if this is going to stick or not. It would be my 2 cents on this.
Yeah, definitely. Agree.
Let's talk about what is understood by entrepreneurship here in the UK versus especially the US and other parts of the world, because I'm really curious about your perspective into this matter. And I'm coming to this from an angle of, and this is something I need to share before we go into this question for the audience. So you have actually been working as what I would call a Renaissance woman, or like a polymath in a certain extent, and like that's something that inspires me as well, because you have one typical day, you have the purpose workshop, you have something called the integrated project, which I don't really know much about, but you also do tutoring, coaching, you have a modeling aspect to what you create, you have therapy, you studied law, you have the existential psychology background that goes with all of that. So bringing in all of these together, I'm sure you have a good perspective from different parts of the British society, and through your own experience, how entrepreneurship is perceived. So yeah, let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly about this. What is your general commentary on what people understand by entrepreneurship? How accurate do you think is it? And yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting and developing sort of perspective on a potential career path, or even something that people are doing alongside an existing career path. Like, I think it maybe doesn't have to be all or nothing. And also this idea of being an entrepreneur and being a sort of creator, I think are quite closely linked. So maybe people see themselves as having an entrepreneurial attitude, or and creating things even within this idea of being an entrepreneur, or like creating things within your existing job. I think there's elements of that there as well. But yeah, in terms of the actual starting a business, I think in the UK especially, attitudes now are really positive towards people who want to maybe leave their jobs and start their own things. I don't know how long that trend has been continuing, but definitely when I jumped into it like a year and a half ago, there's so much support around, there's so much, there's so many mentors and networks and communities that you can draw on. So I think it's definitely a positive thing. And the other thing is how to get started, and the way that you can get started with a lot of different forms of business. So you could maybe just start something and bootstrap it in the ground and see how it goes and sort of develop it like that. or you could go the quite boring way that I did, which was to try and get on an incubator or an accelerator and sort of learn how to start a business step by step by step. And I think that's, it caters to both types of people who just have an idea and know that they want to make it work and are ready to jump in, but also people who maybe are a little bit more like risk averse. And this is where my background in law comes in, where I really just wanted to know what the steps were to build a business. Mm-hmm. And so I think maybe entrepreneurship doesn't have to only cater to a certain personality type. It doesn't only have to be people who have an incredible dream or who are really innovative or who are really creative. I don't know if I would categorize myself as that kind of person. And coming at it from the corporate law background, I was definitely used to working with companies that were much more established, that were much further down the line than startups. But still, there's ways that you can ease yourself into entrepreneurship with quite a structured sort of educational background. Like I went to business school, I went on an incubator, I had the idea there and I sort of built it out like that. That's not the only way by any means. It's not even really, maybe I would say like the most common way, but it's definitely, there are different styles of entrepreneurship to fit people's different preferences. So yeah, in answer to your question, I would say there's a hugely positive acceptance and encouragement of it here, including by, the government, the UK government, and also different funding that's available. And as well as that, there are different styles of entrepreneurship that could be, preferable for different styles of person.
It's great that you're saying there's a good network of support, a lot of communities, and I would actually agree with that. There's also, I would say, a good amount of money that flows into startups as funding. On the other hand, I have been certainly more skeptical and openly skeptical about this as someone who's working with a lot of US companies, a lot of UK companies, and other parts in Europe as well as in other parts of the world. I'm usually observing a certain type of a hesitation still when it comes to the risk-taking aspect of startups or entrepreneurship. And this is a subjective experience, so I'm sharing this with the idea that you can perhaps disagree with me, and I would love to hear why you disagree with me, or perhaps you agree with that, I don't know. But my perspective, to be transparent with it, today, I'm open to changing it, is if you're an entrepreneur or a business owner, people will either think that you've made it and that you're on top of the world, like you're living everyone's dream, or that you're essentially a phony that is just using big words and saying I'm a business owner and so on, but essentially you don't have much to show for it. So I think it kind of bounces back between those two perceptions with a lot of the people that I'm speaking to in events and in different parts of this London startup ecosystem. What are your thoughts on that? How would you disagree with that, or would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I agree or disagree, because I think probably that must be some people's experience, and I think there are so many different attitudes towards what you choose to do with your time and with your life, depending on who you speak to, what communities you're in, what feedback you actually seek from people. And yeah, I wonder whether, had I asked people, like, should I quit my job to start a business? Like, I'm sure some people would have given the second perspective that you shared, which is like, I'm not sure that's a good idea. Like, it doesn't really seem to count for anything. I think once you immerse yourself within the startup community, you tend to be in a bit of a bubble of people who think it's a really good idea. And so whether that's kind of positive reinforcement of your own perspective of like, creating a startup is something to be really proud of, and something that's really innovative and exciting. I think for me, because I came from such a structured kind of corporate background, it was something that definitely felt like the first sort of perspective that you outlined, which is that it felt really exciting. It felt like something that I should be really proud of doing, or at least trying, because it is so different from having that kind of corporate style job. And so it really draws on a whole different set of skills. And I can tell you from personal experience, it has been something that in many, many ways has been harder than my corporate career, and has also taught me so much along the way. So I think from my own perspective, it's been something incredibly positive. I don't know if I'm trying to think if I've ever had the experience the second perspective. I think, again, because like I said, we're quite early stage, and maybe because we've been on quite a structured incubator program, I haven't really encountered, people who have sort of given that perspective, but I have absolutely no doubt that it is out there and I probably will encounter it at some point.
Maybe not. Who knows? It might be just my own perspective. But I think it's good to discuss this in any case because there's learning potential involved for you, me, and for our audience. So I'm obliged to ask.
Yeah.
But my next question actually is about focus. There's this perspective, especially in some parts of the startup community, is focus is everything. So rather than work on 3 startups or 5 ideas, you should just focus on one and go all in. Whereas another perspective is just to have multiple touch points so it's more sturdy. So what's your take on this, especially within the context of the work that you're doing? Because you do have a variety of interest areas and a variety of businesses and projects, from consultancy to one typical day to your workshop to the other work that you do. So how do you make all of this make sense for you? What goes in your mind? What motivates you to work on these different ideas and different projects? I would love to get an insight into that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think with having a lot of different, the fact that I do have a lot of different focuses, and sometimes that can be problematic, because your attention is split between a lot of different things. And I always have the sense like, oh, if I just committed to one thing, I'm sure I could do it really, really much better than I'm doing it at the moment. Um, but ultimately, I find that quite difficult because I do have a lot of different interests, and I find curiosity in a lot of different fields. I think for me, I have a few ideas that sort of run throughout all of these different projects, and maybe that's how I make sense of doing 10 things at once. So some of those ideas are things like social impact, having an impact on the communities that I work with or the people that I come across, especially students. And again, this element of education, I think, sort of runs throughout all of my businesses. And I come from a real background of, in my family, people in education. Like my parents are both teachers, and we have teachers on both sides of the family, like going all the way back to my grandparents, and my brother's in academia. And like it just really is a part of who I am as a person, to be in that field of educational resources. So that's what I see with a lot of the stuff that I do with the businesses, and also with therapy and other consultancy and stuff like that. That's all. I sort of see that as one type of output into the world, this educational element.
Perhaps,
Then, yeah, go on, sorry.
yes, sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
but just to enrich this conversation with another perspective, uh, perhaps what brings all of these together is, for most people, it needs to have a financial angle to all of these that makes sense. So I think we are quite, compared to even 10 years ago, but definitely compared to 50 years ago or 20 years ago, we are currently in a very flexible era where we can actually design our time, design our careers. You can spend the 3 hours a week on a specific task, then you can spend 25 on something else, and then 2 hours on something and 5 hours on something, and you can do it on whatever day you like. So we have that type of flexibility. We can work in different time zones. We can work in different projects. So that's, I think, amazing. It's one of the best things that we have going for us. But that also means that design needs to come together and make sense. And I think one of the things that bring all these down to earth is, okay, what is the financial driver within these businesses? How do I make myself a good living while I'm focusing on these? And from your perspective, how do you make all of this make sense for you financially?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I don't come from a background of sort of financial privilege, so it was definitely something that I had to think about. It wasn't like I could just quit my job and be like, oh, I'll just play around for a few years before I like do
Mhm.
make any money. And obviously, coming out of corporate law, which is a career that I worked so hard to get into, partly because of the sort of financial stability. Like I wanted a job that would be quite financially stable because of the way I hadn't grown up with that feeling of real, like, yeah, financial stability, or just having the money to do whatever I wanted. So when I sought out a legal career, that was one of the things that was really attractive. It's like this steady sense of not affluence as such, or not like being rich, but just being like, you're going to be okay. You're not going to have to worry about money, that sort of thing. So yeah, it was one of the really big challenges that I had when I decided to leave, because I just thought, well, like, what are you doing now? You're sort of going back into a place of not really knowing how you're going to make it work. I think, like you said, there's a lot of flexibility in a lot of the things that I do. I have a lot of monetizable skills, as it were. So, like as a teacher or as a psychotherapist or things like that I can do by myself to earn money, I think have been really helpful, because it's meant that I don't have to put immediate pressure on the businesses to suddenly make some kind of return. It's been an interesting process of working with investors, because I think as we start to bring investors into the business, then there's a lot more pressure on, okay, what metrics, what financial metrics, what targets are you going to reach? How are you going to justify spending other people's money? But definitely at the beginning, when I was sort of building them out, I didn't have the immediate financial pressure, because I had other roles that were sort of helping me survive financially. So yeah, to kind of answer your question, I guess, I think for me, it's been really helpful to have a set of skills that I can apply to earn myself enough money to just live, and like be all right. And then on top of that, just let the businesses kind of evolve at their own pace. And maybe that has actually meant that I haven't been able to put 100% of my time into the businesses. But I think that's quite common for a lot of startup founders. Like, a lot of the people that I come across are also working other jobs, or they have part-time things, or they have another source of income that they can generate by themselves. And it means that maybe you can't put 24/7 time into your startup, but ultimately, like, there are some versions of a startup that you can't monetize immediately, or maybe you need to build something out before you launch or something like that. So it doesn't always work to just turn a profit on a business from day one.
It does make sense. It's kind of about compartmentalization of different areas of your life, dividing the time. It's just as I try to express, it's a design issue. And if you bring a design mindset to it, okay, I'm gonna dedicate 15 hours a week to earn this type of an income because I have the skills in law or in other areas, and then it's gonna give me the freedom in the remaining 25, 30, 35, whatever hours to build something. It also makes sense, I think, from a perspective of optimizing the skills and the talents we have throughout time. Some of them need to serve, I would say, to longer end goals, whereas some of that time should be reserved for real short-term financial stability. So that's, I think, another dimension of balancing out. Okay, if it is skewed into either of those directions in an extreme way, i.e., you're just focusing on earning money for today, but not thinking about the future, then you're gonna have a difficult life. That's my perspective. It's going to keep getting worse and more difficult with new skills and new transformations in technology as you go into your 40s, 50s, and so on. On the other hand, if you over optimize for long term, then you have the problem of, okay, how am I going to survive today? So it's a balancing act in a sense. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a really important question to ask. And I think, I maybe wish I'd come across more founders talking about it at the beginning of, like, how do you actually make this work and also pay your mortgage or whatever you need to do? And I think obviously I am in a position at the moment where I don't have caring responsibilities or other sort of big financial responsibilities, but a lot of people, have families, or they have other things that they need to commit to financially. So, not everyone can quit their jobs and start a business. Like, it just doesn't work in terms of the financials for maybe the majority of startup owners. So I think, it's important to talk about the different ways that you're actually doing it, that you're actually funding it and making it work, even when your business hasn't launched yet, or when you haven't, when you're still raising funds or whatever it is. Not every single founder is going to have the same type of lifestyle, and not every founder has the same ability to commit time to their startup. But I don't think there has to be a template where you make it all fit perfectly. I think everyone is different, and you just got to figure out, how you're going to make it work for you. And like you said, then combining your long-term and short-term goals. I think just being really realistic with yourself. And I think the other thing for me was, like, not being too scared, because I have a lot of financial insecurity or anxiety about, like, will I be able to do it? Like, is this an
We are entrepreneurs, we all do.
yeah, which I think, I wish I'd had more people talk about it because, when you look at someone starting a business, you're just like, wow, they must be doing like so well. That kind of perspective that you were outlining before of like, oh, everyone's doing this is just an amazing thing and they're going to be so wealthy and like whatever. And it was never really a goal for me to earn a lot of money from doing a business. And again, I'm sort of in more of the area of social impact entrepreneurship, where you don't really set out to make a huge amount of money anyway. You're trying to really solve a problem and sort of pour resources back into fixing that problem. But at the same time, I obviously like needed to make sure that I could continue to live where I live and stuff like that, basic needs. So yeah, I was really, really scared to do it. And I wish I'd had more people talking about how difficult it is, like personally and emotionally and socially, and B, like how they actually make it work on a very, very practical level. And so yeah, I can tell you, like, for me, it's been using those personal monetizable skills that really helped me through this initial period, and have enabled me to sort of develop the business, go out and fundraise, like do all of these things that aren't immediately bringing in revenue before it actually starts. So yeah.
That's exactly, for reference, the path I have taken when I first started my journey towards entrepreneurship. The first year and a half, I did consultation work. I've run some seminars and facilitations and workshops. So essentially, I used my talent for learning and regurgitating a skill and educating in conjunction with helping individuals with their careers and their goals. So yes, I have used the same skill. So it's a similar journey in that sense, and it does work. So for people out there who are trying to break into entrepreneurship, this is one of the ways that you can do it. You don't necessarily have to start your business, go all in, get investment, and follow that path. That's a legitimate path, but there's also another path where you compartmentalize and divide up your time and design it in such a way that some of it serves your shorter term interests, whereas some of it serves longer term returns through the business. Overall, this has been an amazing chat. Thank you very much for spending the time to join our conversation, Eloise. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
And as we come to a close, is there a shout out you need to make? So how can people find you and your business, or anything else you would like to share?
Yeah, so I have a website. My name is Eloise Skinner, so it's just eloiseskinner.com. That's where everything is linked from there. And then on socials, my Instagram is Eloise Alexia. So Eloise Alexia, or just search my name and hopefully I'll come up.
Amazing. Thank you very much for joining the chat today.
Thank you so much.